Thank you. Hello, everybody. And thank you for choosing to spend an hour and a half of your precious evening time with us tonight. We really appreciate that. And it's an important discussion we're about to have. And a lot of work to do in our community, as you will see after this discussion. And we're so thrilled that you are here and part of the discussion. So I want to go over a few housekeeping details just before we get started. And we're pleased to provide a Spanish language interpretation. So I'd like to introduce our interpreters, Brenda Graciano and Luis Romero. And Brenda will speak right now and translate this portion of the instructions for those Spanish speakers who are in this channel to help them get to the Spanish language channel. So, Brenda, why don't you take it?
Bueno, si quieren ingresar a la interpretación en español, tienen que seleccionar los controles en la parte inferior derecha de su pantalla y tienen que seleccionar el idioma que desean escuchar, sería el español. Tienen que saber que pueden silenciar el audio original para solamente escuchar un idioma. Y debe unirse al audio de la reunión a través de su ordenador. Y como participante que se une a un canal de idioma, puede volver a emitir sonido en el canal de audio principal si anula el silencio de su audio y habla.
Alrighty, thank you. For those of you not using the Spanish language translation or channel, you don't need to do anything. Keep the translate option in the off position and just stay right here. The question and answer process for tonight will be that attendees may type questions into the chat. We will answer as many as possible, and comments are welcome and encouraged in the chat as well, because that really contributes to a robust discussion. Questions may be posed in both English and Spanish. We may have occasional short delays in our discussion as the interpreter translates questions from Spanish to English for our panelists, so I ask for your patience in advance with that, if there is a delay. Lastly, we ask that you'll stay with us until the end of the event. There will be a link in the screen for a post-event survey. We always like to get your feedback after these conversations. And by completing the survey, you'll have a chance to win a $500 grant to be given to the local nonprofit of your choice. The drawing will be held on Monday, June 20th at 5 o'clock. So if you can get your surveys in right away or by Monday, that would be fantastic. We'll also be sending an email after this event with a link to the survey and also to a different kind of questionnaire this time, since around following up the conversations with action and to gauge interest in your interest in various areas of policy, various ways to engage going further. We'll talk more about that later. So without any further ado, I'll turn the event over to Adine Miller, the Community Foundation's Executive Director.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Delighted to see so many familiar faces. I do want to acknowledge that we have members of the City Council from Mountain View in attendance. We do have a City Council member from the city of Los Altos, although she's not wearing that hat tonight, but she's in attendance as well. And some longstanding members of our community, donors to our community, including some board members of the foundation as well, and members of the Mountain View Solidarity Fund, who are also in attendance. So thank you all for being here. What I want to do is acknowledge my co-sponsors for tonight, just do that very briefly and then jump into framing this. So as we've been doing these community conversations, we have been wonderfully aided and supported in co-hosting and planning of these activities by the Los Altos Women's Caucus. We've also received annual sponsorship from Cal Water and Young and Craig and Company, and we have a long list of co-sponsors for these events. AUW, Upward Scholars, Latina Coalition of Silicon Valley, the Daywalker Center of Mountain View, Appetite for Good, the City of Los Altos Chamber of Commerce, the Los Altos Town Crier, Los Altos Village Association, Mountain View Chamber of Commerce, Forum Health Fund, Parents Helping Parents, Center for Age-Friendly Excellence, Senior Inclusion Participation Project, Starlight Givers, caregivers as well. So I thank you again for the sponsor for helping raise visibility in the issue and for bringing people to these conversations as well. This conversation is a little bit different from the three others that we've had. We initially started this conversation with a deep dive into how the pandemic affected women, specifically how it extended disparities, and an analysis about how women were affected around issues related to employment, issues related to mental health, and issues related to caregiving, whether it was elder care, child care, or the both. But we felt as we tried to do this and have these conversations that it was important for us to also dive into policy. What does it mean not only to raise the issues that we're seeing in the community, but how do we actually take action in our community as well? And that's the framework for this conversation. This is a wonderful opportunity for us to understand where else can we take action? What can members of our community do? What can other institutions do in order to help address some of the disparities that we've discussed in the previous three sessions? So to launch us into this, I would like to introduce Sally Meadows, who tonight is representing the Los Altos Women's Caucus. She's a member of the Los Altos community, as I mentioned before, wears a number of different hats, but she will introduce our moderator and we'll proceed from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Adine, and good evening all. My name is Sally Meadows, and I'm here tonight as a member of the Los Altos Women's Caucus. I also am Vice Mayor, City of Los Altos. So the Women's Caucus is excited to co-host this series and this fourth and final conversation with the Community Foundation. Just a little about the caucus. We're a group of engaged women. Sorry, there's my landline in the background. Figures. We're a group of engaged women that encourage women's leadership in local community and civic affairs. We support fair-minded, effective candidates for local office during election cycles, and we hold education events for the community on salient issues. So thank you all for being here tonight. We are privileged to have Gabriela Chavez Lopez, founding executive director of the Latina Coalition of Silicon Valley, as our moderator this evening. Gabriela is the first executive director of Latina Coalition of Silicon Valley. She is a community catalyst, passionate about uplifting and championing voices around challenging issues in our community, particularly those that disproportionately impact Latinas and people of color. She has an entrepreneurial spirit and is committed to systems change work that removes structural barriers for women and the underserved from reaching their truest potential. She operates with an abundance mindset and is dedicated to empowering and cultivating Latina leaders prepared to make a collective impact now and into the future. In 2021, Gabriela was named an influential woman of Silicon Valley by the Silicon Valley Business Journal, and was also honored as an extraordinary woman of Santa Clara County by the Commission on the Status of Women for her extensive community involvement and impact on women and girls. She is a proud advisory board member of both San Jose Spotlight community newspaper, as well as Santa Clara University's Caucus Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. She is a proud graduate of Eastside Union High School District and a 2009 graduate of Santa Clara University with a BS in Political Science. She has also received continuing education and been a selected participant in Harvard Business School's Young American Leaders Program and USC's Jesse M. Unruh's Institute of Politics. Gabriela was also a panelist in our most recent third community conversation. We're happy to welcome her back to the Community Foundation. And thank you, Gabby, for moderating tonight.
Thank you so much, Sally, for that very comprehensive and kind introduction. And thank you for all that you do to inform, engage, and activate women in our community. We have a lot in common. As mentioned, my name, you can refer to me as Gabby. And in this context, I'm really excited to be talking about issues that I care so deeply about and that I spend my life's work working on every day. And the panel that we have here is just an incredible wealth of information, activism, and leadership. And so really excited to share this moment and to share this space with not only colleagues, but women that I consider friends and mentors in my life. So I want to give a special shout out to Adine and the entire team at Los Altos Mountain View Community Foundation for convening us around these critical topics in our community. And of course, to all of our attendees who are probably watching the Warriors game as well and talking policy with us, we can do it all, right? Thank you just to our fabulous and fierce panel of women who are just leading the charge on policy and advocacy in their respective roles to really advance justice and equity for our communities that need it most. So I will introduce each panelist one by one and give them an opportunity to take a few moments to share a little bit about themselves, their role, and what motivates them to do this work each and every day. So first off, we have Councilmember Margaret Abecoga. She is with the City of Mountain View. Welcome, Margaret, and please feel free to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Gabby, and good evening, everyone. It's really an honor to be here with such a distinguished panel, and I want to thank Adine and the Community Foundation for this opportunity to spend this evening with you. Despite the Warrior game, I hear my husband screaming in the back, so go Warriors. But I appreciate the chance to have this conversation with, an important conversation with all of you. By way of background, I am a council member with the City of Mountain View. This is my fourth term, my 14th year, and I was first elected in 2006, did 2 terms. We term out after 2 terms. I sat out for 2 years and then I returned back in 2016 and serving my second term of my second tour. I was mayor in 2009 during the Great Recession, and then again in 2020 during COVID. So the joke is that I'm the crisis mayor in our community. But I grew up, was born at Stanford, grew up in San Mateo. My parents were immigrants from Japan, working class, and they never picked up the English language. So as soon as I was able to speak English, I became their translator. And through that experience, I saw how injustice and discrimination, frankly, at a very young age, and that when you don't have a voice in this community, there's just a lot of challenges and barriers. And so that really left a big mark on me, and is really one of the motivators for what I do. I believe that everybody in this in our community should have a voice, an equal voice, regardless of your background. And that's what's really driven me to do what I do. I never really thought about running for political office. I enjoyed public service. I enjoyed community service. But I was fortunately encouraged by others to try it myself. And it was when I had my first daughter that I ran for my first office on the County Board of Education. And then my second daughter, who motivated me to run for city council. I'll say running with a 1-month-old is very difficult. I don't advise that anyone does that, but they're what really drives me too. It's about them, their future, and that's what I wanted to do, is to have a voice for women, for young families. At the time when I first ran, we didn't have council members who had children on our council in our public schools. And being AAPI, being Asian American, is also very important to me, especially in this last few years with the rise of anti-Asian sentiment. It's just instilled in me even more the importance of us speaking out, stepping up into these positions where we can help make decisions make policy and hopefully change the tenor of the environment we're in. So I guess I'll just leave it at that. I can go on, but I would like to get into the conversation. So thank you.
Fantastic. Working political mamas unite. I feel that. And so next up, we have Angelica Ramos, who's the president of the National Women's Political Caucus of Silicon Valley. Good evening, Angelica.
Good evening, everyone, ladies here, and thank you, Gabby. Welcome to everybody who has joined us again, despite the Warriors game. I too hear my husband in the other room. I also want to thank the Community Foundation for the opportunity to have this discussion, and I think that that it's going to be a really great discussion. I happen to know everyone here, and I've worked with all of you in some form or fashion to advance, you know, a really robust policy agenda, at least in the past couple of years. So I look forward to it. My background is that I'm here primarily as the president of the National Women's Political Caucus, our local chapter, but I do also have more than a decade of experience in politics and public policy, strategic planning, policy development, and like coalition building and program implementation. I am also currently the lead policy staff for Santa Clara County Supervisor Susan Ellenberg. I handle her women, children, and families policy work and special projects, which deal with a myriad of a lot of other things that I'm sure will pop up during our conversation. Prior to that, I ran her political campaign both in 2018 and just most recently, like, you know, against that horrible unopposed candidate, you know, and she was able to make sure that she secured her seat for another term. And I generally enjoy making sure that women, particularly pro-choice women, get into elected office. Other roles that I generally hold are I'm the commissioner of the Library and Early Ed Commission for the City of San Jose. I sit on the executive board of both the state and local Democratic Party, and I also sit as the vice president of external affairs for the National Women's Political Caucus in California. My education background comes from American University in Washington, D.C., which is a fantastic, fun place. I recommend everyone going to D.C. I have a law degree with a specialization in children's rights, particular juvenile dependency law and juvenile justice law. And I have been a fellow in the past for CORO, Women in Leadership, the Center for Children's Rights, the California Center for Research on Women and Families, and the Children's Defense Fund of California. One last thing that I normally talk about my dog, who has since passed away, but my husband and I definitely honor her every day, and she left us with a gift. I am expecting, and I am 32 weeks pregnant right now. So I'm very excited because now I can talk about policies that'll affect baby. So with that, I will pass that back to you, Gabby, and thank you again for your time.
Wonderful. And congrats again, Angelica, to you and Peter. Super exciting news. And the only thing that changed, I think, after becoming a mom for me was the urgency in which I was like already very active, but like I was like, this needed to happen like 10 years ago. So yes, I could just imagine you post baby. Get ready. Next up, last but definitely not least, Diana Zamora Maruquin, who's the Director of Public Affairs at Planned Parenthood Marmonte, and also my boss. Yay! She's on my board president at Latino Coalition of Silicon Valley, and really privileged to work with her closely. So Diana, take it away.
Thank you, Gabby. I'd like to start, obviously, by echoing the sentiments of my fellow colleagues, friends, and panelists in terms of the thank you for convening this meeting and getting this group together. where we're going to get into some, I think, really good discussion about things that are important and that really matter to us. A little bit about me. I am originally from San Diego, so Southern Californian. And I am also a child of immigrants. I'm the first person in my family to have the opportunity to attend university. And I think it was through that experience that I really realized, growing up in a place that was expensive, but also had a really good social network, I had an opportunity to engage and learn and do a lot of stuff that a lot of folks who come from my financial background would not have the chance to do. And that really, I think for me, became the catalyst for why I do the work that I do. I didn't believe and don't believe that anyone should be stopped of their potential because of a lack of opportunity, be it financial or otherwise. And so I really live my work motto and how I use my time in terms of giving back, so that if there is someone else who was in my position, that they will also have the opportunity to live their best life, to succeed, and really maximize their potential. In terms of some of the other spaces that I sit in, I am on the Community Advisory Board for San Jose Spotlight. I am a member of the DEI Task Force for Santa Clara, the city of Santa Clara. As Gabby mentioned, I'm the president of the Latino Coalition, so I get to see her in action all the time. And I've also in the past been a board member for California Women Lead, and I've also involved in the party, the Democratic Party. I also think it's important to mention that for me, this conversation is really exciting because there's a lot of different ways to do advocacy work, and policy is a very important way, but sometimes it doesn't seem the most fun or like the sexiest, right? But really, it's where fundamental change can truly happen, especially at a more local level. And I've had the opportunity to work with all the women on the panel, and I can speak from firsthand experience that it's by building those coalitions and by really joining together on the things that matter, that are not just necessarily about the one issue that I work on, right? But that are just in general about the movement, can really move the needle in a very powerful way. And so I think that for me is something that I'm excited to explore. I've also, I have worked for a state assembly member, a state senator, and 2 different members of Congress. And so I really have had the opportunity to know what it's like to be sort of on the staff side of an elected official who is developing legislation, who has the community coming to them. And now in my current role, I have the opportunity to go to those elected officials and work with them and their staff to get policies passed and get policies moving that are going to make really instrumental changes. And so I think that that's a unique sort of perspective and place that I've been able to experience both sides of it, and can really bring sort of that level of expertise, having worked in government and politics for quite some time. And I think that the final thing I will say is that giving a voice to women and people that identify as female is extremely important. We know that disproportionately COVID and any other challenge disproportionately impacts women, and then women of color, which all 4 panelists and the moderator today represent that demographic. And so bringing that voice to light is really important, because there are a lot of spaces in which those people can't take time off work to speak. They can't join even if they want to, because they have to be at work so they can pay rent, put food on the table, et cetera. So I really just want to, again, applaud everyone for bringing this together so that we can have those really robust conversations. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. So you can see why we all just hang out and get along. Aligned values for sure. So just a little grounding again in our conversation. The online community conversation series really focused on the pandemic's disproportionate effects on women. These gender disparities have showed up in areas of mental health, child and elder caregiving, and social service workers, impacting women and especially under-resourced women of color. This 4th conversation is centered on policy, which we've talked about, what has already happened, what is going to happen, and what needs to happen. and to right-size a ship which has far too long was off kilter, made only worse by the last 2 years. Obviously, we've invited women with different perspectives, oversight, and areas of expertise to give us an overview of the current state of affairs for women in our region. We've also intentionally included Planned Parenthood in this conversation because, timely enough, reproductive health and justice are so inextricably linked to everything else we've discussed to date. And this conversation will also touch on what you can do, as you being all of our listeners and our attendees, what you can do to be a part of the solution. We cannot do it alone, that is for sure, immediately, and to influence the future, including an opportunity to remain in touch as we progress on a journey of understanding and action together. And as a reminder, please submit your questions, accolades, all of the things, and that we can't see you. So whatever you put in the chat, we appreciate. It's like speaking through the chat to our panelists, encouraging them. If you agree, it's a great insight. Please do share that with all of us. So let's jump right in. So policy-wise, from each of your vantage points, what are you feeling? We'll start with positive. What are you feeling positive about that has been done so far, locally, at the state level, nationally? What have been steps in the right direction? And I'll start with Councilmember Abe-Coca.
Thank you, Gabby. So I would say, of course, COVID was, an unbelievable experience and tragic in many ways, but I also found a lot of silver linings. And one thing that was very prominent to me was that I feel happened was that we were able to really come together as a community and regionally, like within our county. We had an unprecedented, I guess I'd say, experience of working together, almost like for the first time. I think when, I remember when we went into sheltering in place, immediately as soon as that like midnight hit, emails just started flooding in from folks who are, looking for help. They're losing their jobs, their businesses were suffering, and folks just needing help. And my thought was, how do we get help to folks right away? But the other part of it too is I actually started seeing emails from folks saying, how can I help? And that was what was really inspiring and encouraging. And I think that's what really helped us come together and get through this. And even from a city perspective, we were all dealing with similar situations. And so I think we talked with each other more across city boundaries. We started talking with the county because a lot of the, assistance comes from the county. And fortunately, we had at that time the president of the Board of Supervisors, Cindy Chavez, and she's an incredible woman leader who is just so great at collaborating. And so it was around the issue of testing. We didn't have testing in North County. And so it was actually another Councilwoman Liz Nis from Palo Alto, who has a public health background. And she, was just felt really that it was important to have testing in North County. We didn't have any sites there. And she would just call me like almost every day saying, Margaret, what are we going to do? And so we started talking and thinking about how can we work together. We ended up putting a letter together, having all the mayors signed onto it and sending it to the county, asking for testing in North County. And with President Chavez at that time, she started these weekly Saturday morning 9:30 a.m. meetings with all of the cities and the county together. And we would just talk about all of the issues that were happening. So that was like the first time I would say that ever something like that happened. And I think we've been able to continue that and so many of our issues now are regional anyway, that it really does take that just the conversations, the cross boundaries to work together to actually see progress. So I would say that was one of the major differences and something very positive that came out of COVID. But also, I would say, it gave us a chance to try new things. And I go back to that idea of, for me, it was like, how do we get help relief to folks as quickly as possible? And Mountain View, we're very fortunate, and it's just the tradition or history of being fiscally prudent. So fortunately, despite COVID, our budget was sound. We had funding in affordable housing funds, and so we were able to. Or I guess for me, I've always felt like direct assistance is the best way to get assistance out quickly. And so we were able to implement a rent relief program of, I think it was now about $6 million in rent relief that we were able to provide. We provided CSA, our community services agency, with funding as well, to be able to get out food security programs. And so it was really that, trying to just get relief out as quickly as possible. We were able to provide first microloans and then later on grants to small businesses, and trying to keep our businesses afloat. So it was really that, is just like, how do we quickly, and government, everyone knows or feels that is slow. But I think that during COVID, we were really able to show that we can move quickly, and we were able to do that. And for me, it was about really, just kind of thinking out of the box and not going with the status quo, but figuring out how we can do things differently to be more effective and efficient. And I think we were able to achieve that. So there, thanks.
Well, kudos to you. Definitely felt the sense of urgency and leadership that the city of Mountain View took. My previous life, I was very in tune with affordable housing policy and all of the rental relief, and you guys were definitely a leader in that space and had such a great progressive council. So very, very good to hear. So Angelica, policy-wise, what from your vantage point are you feeling positive about? Lots of positive things coming from your office.
Yeah. And, I think you said it earlier when the urgency is a thing, right? Now that I am expecting, and Council Member Abe Koga definitely mentioned the urgency. I find it fascinating how fast and how brilliantly women can work when we're put in the fire. One thing that I know that the Supervisor Ellenberg has talked a lot about is childcare. When Dr. Jawan, who is the superintendent of schools for the county, had given us the heads up, hey, we're going to have to close. It was like March 13th or something, and said, we're going to have to close the schools. She had done it in partnership with the county public health officer, and, it had to be done. But then, my brain was like, oh my God, where are these kids going to go? And then how are our workers? We employ 23,000 workers at the county. How are they going to come to work if no one's watching their kids? So, there was just a moment of panic, and I'll never forget it, because that panic was all consuming. And of course, I'm lucky enough to have a boss who is very calm and doesn't it has a very calming influence on me, and is very much okay, well, let's figure it out. And I figured out that, the county exec has emergency powers. And so let's emergency contract with childcares in the area and provide direct childcare relief to our workers. And it ended up being this crazy emergency pilot. So we were able to provide childcare for a bunch of our employees, specifically our disaster service workers, and nurses, doctors, our frontline workers, the people who were helping with assistance in the Department of Employment and Benefits Services, the people who needed to still come to work because we were the county, and the county is the safety net. And people, if nothing comes, if you don't get any assistance from the county, when you come to us, it is a crisis already. So if we're not there, that is a problem. And so we figured out that we could do this emergency contract and provide childcare. Now, it wasn't like easy. There were a lot of problems in terms of implementation, and then trying to figure out, how to ensure that employees didn't get dinged tax-wise, which is a whole other thing in general, because we should just give free childcare. But I think because it's not really a benefit, but that's just a personal thing. But what I would say is that, that was one of the greatest policy achievements that we had done in terms of like showing the county, oh, by the way, we can give childcare like now, after COVID. And they were like, oh yeah, I guess we can. And I know that Supervisor Simidian had tried it. Supervisor Chavez and Supervisor Cortese, they had tried to do this earlier prior to the pandemic, but we were able to utilize and show, hey, you could do this. We can do this. We can do this. We have the money. We have the numbers. We can do this, and it would be helpful to our workforce, many of whom are women. And so it was that I thought was probably the one thing I feel positive about, because as you know, many people, and polling has shown, many people are now clued into how important childcare was during the pandemic. And now that they know, it's not like, oh, I need a babysitter. No, you need childcare. You need to trust somebody to watch your kids while you go to work, and you need to make sure that they receive quality childcare. At the state and national level, just as an aside, this couldn't have happened without state and national resources, because they worked quickly to also provide direct funding to the county, who then turned around and provided direct funding to everywhere else. And I do want to highlight that the city of Mountain View did a really great job of partnering with us a lot on getting direct relief out to their residents. And I thought that was, a model in how we should definitely provide relief instead of, holding on to the money, and making sure. And of course, like I said, women do the lion's share of collaborative work, because Supervisor Chavez had done all those weekend collaboration groups, your meetings. And I thought that was like, you had to, right? Like, it was just, we were in the height of this emergency, and you just had to have communication, because without communication, there was no collaboration.
Yeah, the communication channels seemed like they were nonstop. That's for sure. Thinking back. And so I guess jumping to the next question, which interestingly enough, I think, Diane, I think you can answer. Is there anything that you supported or personally tried to champion that didn't work out? More importantly, why do you think that is? And then more importantly than that, how did you adjust your thinking and or action? What's the approach now?
Yeah, I appreciate that. In my time with, so the answer to your question is yes. In my past job, there were definitely things that we would fight for that didn't come to fruition because we didn't have the necessary number of votes on city council, for example. And I think, a part of that is you don't stop fighting simply because you're not going to get the final vote you need, right? There is a motivation, a moral compass, drivers that I think we each have, and are the reason that we are in the line of work that we are. And so, when you go forward and you fight for something that is fundamentally right and that will potentially change the lives of the people that you represent, you obviously want to manage, some level of expectation, but you ultimately still need to go out and fight that fight with everything you have, because it shows where your values are. How you spend your time and how you spend your money are direct reflections, in my opinion, of your value system, right? So an organization's budget is a reflection of their values. And so I think that's that's a key component. And when you look at, when I think back and I think about some fights, some battles that you might have had and weren't technically successful in the way that we would define success. They were successful in motivating our base. They were successful in empowering people. They were successful in educating people. And they were successful in engaging people, right? And that's really the base of how you move any policy forward. It is going and speaking to your electeds. It is going and speaking at city council meetings. It's writing those letters. It's showing up when it matters. And so, when you think about sort of the perspective of how you can shift your mindset, it's really knowing that you're building all of those you're creating a base, and then you're building on that base. These are all building blocks to finally, when the tide changes, be prepared, have the infrastructure, have the know-how, have the folks, your army already built, so that you've been practicing. And then, like I said, when the tide changes, then you can go forward and then and make that that change. And so it can be a bit deflating. It can be a little demoralizing, but that's also, I think, the reason why these conversations are important, and why it's important for us to talk to each other, because then we know what we're all working on. We know where we can build power based on coalitions and based on allies. And so, as we've mentioned, coalition building is something that is it tends to be something that women do more than men, and it's not easy. So whoever thinks that just because you have a bunch of folks makes it easier, it doesn't. Sometimes it makes it harder, but you're building power as a group, and that is what it becomes effective. And so, for me, the mind shift was really remembering that they're not failures. They're learning lessons, and they're ways to keep folks engaged and to educate and to communicate your message. And then with time, perhaps it's folks that are in office, perhaps it's just the desire of the community at large. Things change, and you're prepped and ready to fight the fight. And as we've noted, and as I'm sure people know, Roe v. Wade is on the chopping block. That draft that was leaked, talk about a catalyst for motivation. The amount of action that has come as a result of that, even though folks outside of California know that their states, many states, are going to go dark, that doesn't stop them from being active. California is doing a ton of work on that front, even though we are one of the best states on those issues. That doesn't stop us from being active, right? So just sort of some factors I think that all play in.
It's a fantastic overview. I feel like I just got an advocacy policy 101 from Dr. Zamora Marroquin. No, it was beautiful, and just really walked us through those building blocks and what a campaign, and successful or not, whatever, what it looks like. So speaking of the tides changing, our world changed in felt like a minute, an instant. And don't really know if things will ever be the same. So on that note, given the times we're experiencing here in Silicon Valley, and this will be for Council Member Abe Koga, what do you see are the opportunities we need to capitalize on right now?
Thank you, Gabby. And you can call me Margaret if you like. Again, I think through COVID, it gave us, well, one, because of the sense of urgency, we really, as I mentioned, I think we really had to rethink how we were doing things for us as city government, municipal government, maybe, and perhaps all governments. We realized how we were very inward facing. People needed help, they would have to come to City Hall or to one of our facilities. And what COVID did was change that completely, where we really needed to go out into the community. So it was some, small, not small in terms of the feat of getting it done, but things like becoming more, technology advanced and having things online and more accessible to folks. But just being more in tune with what was happening out there, and then being able to go out into the community. So I think that was a major thought change that we had to do, that we had to really pivot ourselves on. And so I think that was big. We were able to try things that we've talked about for years, but for some reason something was holding us back. I'd say the most, I think the most popular example of that was closing off our Castro Street, our downtown street, to car traffic, and allowing the restaurants to have their tables out on the street. And that was something, I live in downtown. My neighbors have been wanting it for decades, but we had heard the businesses didn't want that. We didn't really know how we could do it, and yet we had to do it to be able to help the businesses to survive. And so here we are. We actually have decided to permanently keep it closed. We were fortunate again, because of our strong budget, that when the cities received ARPA, the relief funds, the COVID relief funds from the federal government, we received about $7.5 to $8 million. And it actually ended up being extra money. We didn't have to backfill our budget with that funding. So we had the opportunity to think about, what can we do with this funding, and try new initiatives. So when I know there are members of the Solidarity Fund that the Community Foundation is the fiscal sponsor of, but that was a grassroots group of women who came forward and asked us for funding so that they could get, again, relief, immediate financial assistance out to community members, those that are most in need, those that they knew through their networks. And so we provided $1 million of that fund, and they were able to get checks out to, we just went through this, about 400 families. And we just, with our we get a second tranche of ARPA funds that we just talked about at our budget meeting on Tuesday. We'll be providing another $800,000 to help another 300 families. Something that I kind of latched onto during the presidential election. I was an Andrew Yang supporter, and a big reason for that was because of his universal basic income concept. And again, it kind of ties into something I really feel strongly about, is just being able to help folks help themselves by being able to maybe help them, provide them that little extra help financially so that they can improve their lives. And so as I learned more about UBI, and I also learned about the mayor's initiative for guaranteed basic income, I initiated that conversation and asked my council to support a GBI pilot program. So we have allotted $1 million for that. We're in the process of getting that up and running. And we just allotted a second year's worth, another $1 million. And the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, they gave us a $100,000 grant towards that. So being able to try these new ideas and concepts, especially for me, being here for 14 years, and I love it. It's still exciting, but it's a little bit same old, same old. So I guess as I get closer to the end of my time, and this was what happened my first round too, I just, thought, well, what can I do to make a mark? Like, I don't want to just be a council member sitting on the dais. I really want to be able to do something that makes a difference. And during my first tour, it was the minimum wage increase. I initiated us going to, it was at that time $10 matching San Jose, but being able to do it as a city ordinance. And then with the goal of getting to 15, which we did do a few years later. And now we have a CPI increase. So we are at $17.10. And I understand, I think we're one of the highest, if not the highest in the country. So it all kind of ties with that. Now it's GBI being able to provide that extra financial assistance. So, and I really believe that, at the end of the day, it's about empowering people. Let folks make their own decisions. They know best how that extra assistance, where it should go so that they can improve their lives. And I just really want to, just try to reimagine how we do things and try different pilots to see what works and what doesn't. So, when you're asking Diana about failed policies, I don't know. It's still kind of, a test. It seems like things are, the data is showing it's positive. But why not try? I think that's what's really, important, is that we do continue to innovate, especially around here in Silicon Valley. Like, where else if we can't do it, who can? So that's my mindset. I think that really kind of over COVID, I was able to really, spend some time reflecting, like, what do I want to do as an individual? What can we do as a community? And how can we do things differently to hopefully be more effective?
Yes, innovate and be bold with our asks. We might just get it. So, Angelica, what are the opportunities that you think we can capitalize on right now? Okay.
Okay, sorry about that. I was like, why is it not unmuting? There's so much in and of course, both Diana and the council member have both illustrated what type of opportunities we can move forward with. I will say some of the work I've done at the county is all about thinking ahead, right? About recovery. And knowing that recovery takes a while. And so hoping that we can get to the public, like, recovery is going to be a long process in terms of not just, how we do that economically, but like for our families. I was the lead on our children's roadmap to recovery, where we looked at how we look at children who have lost a parent or caregiver to COVID, and what services that they can that they should be able to be provided. So grief counseling, academic support, transportation. Just think about all the things. And luckily for the county of Santa Clara, we were very fortunate to have the testing and the vaccination, and these great rates of being safe and making sure that, like, we did not have such a high death rate. However, there are still children who have lost a parent or caregiver, and some of these children who have lost a parent or caregiver, are in households of color and are in multi-generational households. And so these are all things that I think that we have an opportunity to look at and make sure that we're attacking moving forward. Another thing is that mental and behavioral health is everywhere and talked about frequently. It's in every conversation I've ever had with basically anyone. And I think we can capitalize on trying to put resources towards ensuring that our mental and behavioral health system works for all of us, not just people who have insurance, or who are lucky enough to have insurance or can just pay for it. but we also need to make sure that we're building up that workforce, which is sorely needed. And then finally, as part of that recovery roadmap, childcare, and which is incredibly important. Our workforce was depleted because of just name it. We had to close down childcare facilities. We had to, people. It's also a small micro business, and that affected definitely women of color, in particular Latina women, and some Filipinos as well. And so I just, I think that it's important for us to look at how we can provide economic stability to family childcare homes. Finally, most recently, I know that our office I'm going to zoom in, zoom out. In my role as somebody who support women, specifically women who are pro-choice and care about kids and families. I've been doing it for over a decade, and the reason why is because women care about the same things I care about, probably because I'm a woman, but something that I found fascinating in my role as in National Women's Political Caucus is how many women face all of these obstacles for full, economic success and barriers, which includes childcare. So something that has always been on the forefront of our minds, of which I was lucky enough that my boss introduced, was making sure that women can return back to the workforce, and in particular, not just. And I wanted us to be very equitable about it, right? Like you want to make sure that you're not just thinking about women who are stay-at-home moms, and because they have that opportunity to do that. Like we should also tackle women, ensuring that women who do not have the socioeconomic opportunity to advance in their careers because they had to stay at home, because it's cheaper to do that than to get childcare. I already know someone, a former colleague of mine, who left, the workforce because she has kids, and it's just cheaper to not put them in childcare. And I think that all of this across the continuum is something that we have the opportunity to talk about and to champion and make sure that we're, talking about holistically and equitably, and making sure that we're not ignoring subsets of the community in order to make sure that there's full economic, ability for women to advance. Like you said, Gabby, right now, like childcare is expensive. We know so many people right now who are trying to access childcare and are thinking about it and are on waiting lists, and it's insane. And then moms need a break, and they also need to be able to return back to work, and be able to be promoted, and not be like told, well, you have a kid, or even when they're pregnant, be someone being fussing over them, and that, oh, you're taking too much work on. Like, let the woman decide, let the mom decide whether or not they can take on that work or not, right? I think it's just one of those things where we now have an opportunity to have that discussion, and in a very thoughtful way.
Hear, hear. Yes. Appreciate all of what has been said. And so we'll go into a little bit of a lightning round, but we're still not going to talk super fast. But I know UBI has been brought up as a universal basic income as a wish list policy item, but I'd love to kick it off to the panel to just talk about the policy item, your elevator pitch on it, and what we can do to support, just to educate all of us on some of the policy wish lists. You can have two if you'd like. as well. So I'll kick it off to Diana first.
All right, my 2 policy wish lists. As many of you may have heard, Senate Constitutional Amendment 10 has been introduced, and that would change our constitution in the state of California to specifically call out access to abortion as a covered right for the state. And if passed, we'd be the first state to explicitly call that out. The Assembly and the Senate have until the 30th of this month to pass it. And if they do, it will then be a ballot initiative item that the voters will get to vote on. So that would be a policy issue that I think is really important, thinking about not just the need that Californians will have, but also being there for folks that live in other states that do not live in places that value a woman's right to make decisions about her own reproductive health care. That would be one. Let's see. I think the second one that I would say is there are a number of bills that are being presented before the Assembly and the Senate. One deals with protecting both providers and patients from civil liability if other states try to sue the individual. And the other deals with medical privacy, which basically would ensure that a patient's medical records are protected if other states or law enforcement try to get access to those as well for any sort of lawsuit. So I think, when we think about a person's right to access any sort of healthcare, ensuring that they have the right to privacy and that they have the right to not be sued or come after are critical so that they can make decisions, for themselves. I'll also note that when reproductive health is on the line, every other type of healthcare is on the line, especially for women, because it all ties in, right? And so by taking away one aspect of healthcare, you are in essence taking away all aspects of a person's healthcare and their ability to care for themselves and for their families. And so for us, it's really important to make sure that people have that autonomy to make the decisions that are best for them. So I think those would be my my top 2, and I'm always happy to chat more about the many other policies that the state of California and our governor are putting forward, and not just about reproductive health care, but just access to health care as a general statement.
Awesome, thank you. And if any of our panelists want to put any links or additional information in the chat, I'm sure our attendees would appreciate it. I'll kick it off over to Margaret, just because she asked me to call her that. For the record, what are your wish list items? 1 and 2. You're on mute.
Thank you, Gabby. Absolutely what Diana said with reproductive rights. I second everything she says. But I would say for other initiatives, I guess actually going back to what Angelica had talked about with childcare, sort of a different or related to that. I think another thing that was a positive that came out of COVID was the ability to work from home or Zoom in, and that provided flexibility for folks, and especially women. And I saw it. I have 2 daughters. I've served on the council since they were 3 and 5. They're now 18 and 20. But when they were little, it was a challenge for me to have to go to council meetings and spend 8 hours in the chambers, not being able to put my daughters to sleep, and I missed out on many things as part of as they're growing up. And sometimes I had to make those decisions too, as to whether I go to a meeting or be with my girls. And what this COVID has done is that it's enabled folks, and there are colleagues of mine who have young children, and it's enabled them to be able to participate. And so I hope that stays. I don't know. And as a policy, at least within our city, we're trying to, encourage that, to continue that with our employees, to give them that flexibility. So I think just in general, like workplace changes, policy changes to allow for more flexibility, work from home, childcare, that will, give women the same equal footing as our male partners. To be able to have a career and have a family. I'm very hopeful for that, and would like to continue to work on policies like that. Overall, just other general policies. It was mentioned. COVID definitely brought up the increased emphasis or need for mental health, and that's something that's very personal to me. My older daughter has anxiety and depression and ADHD, and it was a struggle during COVID. Although COVID also gave us the time to spend more time as a family and work through those issues. So I'm very grateful for that. But I realize the need is great, and the assistance is still much to be desired. There's just a lack of services. So I think, we as a community as a whole really need to embrace mental health and wellness as priority for all of us. Even though we're a city, I think we can play a role in that, and we've tried to do that with partnerships, frankly, with mental health providers, our school system. Again, I see it's just heartbreaking to me. We have had a student at Mountain View High School, and my girls go take up their lives for the last 4 years in a row. And it's just is so heartbreaking to me. And, we just need to change that. So that's something, a focus area for me. And then a bigger issue that actually ties back to, again, as me being a mom, I see this Gen Z group. My girls are in the Gen Z category. And climate change is such an important, it's a real issue to them. Like, they are really afraid that the world is going to end and they're not going to have a future. And so that's really struck a chord in me. And and that's something that, I think we just need to really take seriously. And I'm excited. We were able to be a part of the start of Silicon Valley Clean Energy. We just need to keep moving that needle on climate change efforts. So those would be my 2 focus areas moving forward. Thanks.
Yes, listening to our youth and their concerns and their priorities is definitely, I think, going to lead us to the promised land for sure. So yes, thank you for uplifting your daughter's voices and their voices in this conversation, because they definitely have a lot of opinions. They have social media and they voice them. And so even in our AIA, we have a youth leadership program, or Engaged Latina Leadership Activists. They're 19 and they keep us on our toes for sure, and challenge us and make us question a lot of things. And so I do believe in the power of our young people, and being able to give them a platform as well to advocate and to voice what their priorities are. So Angelica, you're up next.
I have 2 things as well. I'll wear one with my NWPC hat. SB 1100, which was authored by Senator Dave Cortese, co-authored by Evan Lowe, is a bill for all intents and purposes, intended to stop harassment of public officials. During COVID, a downside of COVID was that decorum was no longer something that people decided that they had to be a part of in our day-to-day dealings. In particular, something that I'm studying right now just because I'm a weird nerd like this, but women have been harassed at an alarming rate because they're mostly public health officers. They are the ones who go into public health. They are mostly school board members because they have kids. Most recently, and I guess the most egregious was against one of our own fellow, people here in our cohort, council member, then Mayor Mariko Sayak in the town of Los Gatos, was just horribly harassed for months, and then they decided to come for her family, and that is completely unacceptable. And it's very difficult to recruit women, good women, to run for office, because as you can see, women are the ones who are the collaborators. They are the ones who move things quickly, as we've already laid out here for everyone. And I've noticed that there have been cases there have been cases where I've studied, like in the city of Los Angeles, like there were women council members who were being harassed in their homes. And this is happening all over the country. And so, I know that that this would be, this bill would reform some portions of the Brown Act and provide additional protections. And I think that if we don't do something to make people accountable for basically not following the rules of decorum or code of conduct, and allow people to just go ahead and harass women, particularly women of color. I'm just astounded at just how much they are targeted. And like I said, I'm in the middle of studying this right now because I just need to know if my theory is right, just because I'd heard about it so much and I've talked to so many people. And now as I'm trying to recruit women to run for office, they're like, no, I'm not doing that. And I'm like, no, we need you, right? We need you to run. Like, no, I'm not doing that. Like, someone can come to my house, and like, that's not okay. And, like I said, we need the lived experiences of women and women of color and moms to like make policy, because, there have been years and decades and, hundreds of years of policy made without our input. And it has been detrimental and created barriers for us and our families. Relatedly to that, with my other hat, probably not sure how we can do this, but the city and county of San Francisco provides paid family leave, fully paid family leave, not like here, pay into your state disability insurance and get a debit card, which I just learned I get. Again, very happy I'm able to get some form of maternity leave, even if it's through the state. But I paid for that, number one. And number two, and I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to pay for that. And number two, like, other jurisdictions are able to do it. Like, they're able to give fully paid family leave for 8 weeks and baby bonding time. And, I've spoken to a lot of people who are parents who have young ones and have said to me, they really appreciated the time off to bond with their child. And, it took a long time for me to actually get pregnant. We had a lot of problems doing it, and it was very difficult. And I would like to maximize each moment I could have with this child. And so I'm hoping that this is like something, this would be on my policy wish list, fully paid family leave for like everyone in the county. Like, why not? So, dream big, they say. So those are my two things: making sure that women feel safe and that when they run for office, and that no one shows up at their house, and make sure that parents can have fully paid family leave without like strings attached.
Awesome. All wishes are granted. I love it. I wish we could make that happen. And thank you, everyone who's contributing to the chat and sharing your hopes and sharing your dreams and desires, because we have to speak it into existence. That's the first step. And the second step is to take action, which I know our panelists will be great advisors around, in terms of how do we as attendees, as folks listening today, make a difference in the public and private spheres that we operate in our lives? How do community members make their voices heard? What is your advice to folks listening? And I'll start with Diana.
So I'll just start with the shameless plug. We have many volunteer opportunities. We have newsletters that let you know not just what we're doing, but also let you know specifically how you can engage on our C3 side. And these are trainings, not just in terms of what it is that we do, because I think a lot of people also don't understand the variety of services that we provide. We are primary care doctors, we do cancer screenings, we do behavioral health, we do gender affirming care. So there's an opportunity there, but some of the trainings we have are on how to go and speak to elected officials, how to create your story. You don't have to use our services to be an ally and to share your voice and support. We also have, most recently, we have had a tremendous amount of support from the County of Santa Clara, from the County of San Mateo, from San Jose City Council, from Mountain View, where we have a health center. And that support has come in a variety of ways. Resolutions, declaring those entities defenders of reproductive freedom, and also funding, helping us, get funding as we have to expand our footprint. And hearing stories from the community, we hear time and again, are so valuable for elected officials because they're hearing your voice. And so that to me is, is definitely one way that you can get involved. You can write letters, you can speak. We have lobby days, right? And many other nonprofit organizations have this as well, where you go to the Capitol or virtually go to the Capitol at this moment and speak directly with the senators and the assembly members, or the members of Congress, to get your voice out there. So there are those ways that you can do it. The other thing I would say is voting. If you have the privilege to vote, your vote is your voice. Look at the candidates, look who is supporting them. Really be mindful, because we have seen elections lost and won by 22 votes. That is not a lot, right? So votes truly do matter. And the final thing I will say is join with organizations that share your values and that work in the issues that are important to you. If you can contribute financially, great. If you can't, time is also one of our most precious resources. So if you can align yourself with any of the organizations in the community that do the work that you care about, that's also a great place to network, to meet people, to build your own personal base, because then you become a trusted source of information for your family and your friends. I get calls constantly. What do you know about this? What's going on over here? Because I'm in those spaces, and you can absolutely serve as that trusted source of information as well. I'm always happy to chat with folks about other ways to engage, but those would be the sort of the fastest. And then social media, just following the organizations, the electeds that you care about on social media is an easy way to sort of get those quick snippets of what's going on right now and what they're involved in that moment. So those would be my my top suggestions.
Great tips for sure. Margaret?
Thanks, Gabby. I agree with Diana. I think, I guess I would first start off in saying, and I often, say to folks who are interested in getting more involved, is to figure out what your passion is, what the issues that you care about really are. And there's usually an organization out there that works on those issues. And so I think it's a great way to get involved. I started out serving on nonprofit boards, on the board of the Japanese American Citizens League on civil rights. I worked for ACCI, Asian Americans for Community Involvement. So there's, so many nonprofits out there that are always in need of volunteers and board members too, in particular. And I think board work is a great way to gain leadership skills and working on policy issues, and even things like how to run a meeting are really important skills to have. I appreciate what you do, Gabby, with the Latina Coalition of Silicon Valley. Just groundbreaking work that you've done, and you've been an inspiration. Myself and a few other Asian American women who just started an organization called Asian Women Empowered. We actually just gained fiscal sponsorship from the Los Altos Mountain View Community Foundation, and this is it's going to be a membership group. But the idea behind this was that women are, and especially in our AAPI community, it's still been historically men who've taken the front of the stage. Women, we're happy in the backgrounds helping other people, but it really is important for us to take front and center stage too, and step it up. And so that's what AWE's intent is. And part of it too is that we need to, as women, support each other and promote each other, because if we don't do it, frankly, no one's going to do it. And we tend to be more modest and humble, and that doesn't always get you the attention, frankly, that is needed sometimes to move your initiatives. So that's the idea behind AWE, and I'm excited to build that organization. So that's another thing, is that you can always, start your own group too. But as an elected woman, I do feel very strongly in building the pipeline. There are more of us, which is really great. And Mountain View City Council, we have 6 out of 7 of us who are women, and I certainly see the difference of women, the way we work, the collaboration that we do. We may not always agree, but there's a difference, I think, in just our personal respect for each other, and that we try to work with each other. And so I just feel strongly more and more that we need more women in leadership roles and in elected office, just like Angelica and her work with the NWPC. And so, I would encourage women to look at, there's a lot of leadership programs. I'm excited that City of Mountain View, we've had a Spanish language leadership academy for the last several years. We just graduated our first Mandarin speaking leadership academy. We only had 17 members there. There's like Leadership Mountain View, the chambers run these leadership programs. Those are really helpful to, one, gain leadership skills, but really also to build your network. And then each city has commissions and advisory boards. And again, those are great ways to learn more about what your city does. And then I just really hope that, more women will step up. It is hard. It is much more difficult, I'd say, as a woman, just because there aren't as many of us. So, I've been in meetings where I'd be the chair of the board at like the city's association of, every city has a member on there. And I was president one year, and I was the only woman, and it was 14 men. And, I'm trying to speak and totally drowned out by the men. And so there's just there are definitely challenges, but I think that's where, we can come and support each other and hopefully build that network. I appreciate what Los Altos, the Women's Caucus there, does. But I really think that it's important. And I feel very much, even more as I get older, that, I need to take a more active role in seeking out women and working with them and mentoring them if I can to run for office so that we can continue the pipeline.
Definitely. Super, super inspiring, and lots of work to do. I just saw something in the chat that distracted me. Angelica.
I'm just going to say I echo everything that the rest of the panelists said. I mean, obviously, Diana just gave us everyone should just feel lucky, because Diana gave us a primer on advocacy work. And you know, thank you to Margaret for definitely like inspiring people to apply for commissions and become part of membership organizations. National Women's Political Caucus really does, you know, we only support pro-choice women. We like, if there is no woman in the race, we don't weigh in the race. We don't support men, and because everyone else does. So why should we waste our resources? So that's what we do. But also, you know, like I said before, the advocacy is important, and not just to my office in the supervisor's office, but to the supervisor that you may also have. You know, a lot of people here may or may not live in District 5, and Supervisor Simidian is a champion for mental and behavioral health, and is also a champion for reproductive health, and has been in his former role as in the state legislature, doing stuff around TK equity and pipelining teachers, and expanding transitional kindergarten. So, you know, it's important to know that all politics is local. So pay attention locally. You know, the people, you know, I spoke at a Planned Parenthood rally, and the people who you elect at the local level will eventually make it to the state, federal, you know, the higher levels. And so it's important who you elect, you know, in your general, you know, generally, locally. So please pay attention. And with that, I will turn it back to you, Gabby.
Oh, wonderful. And my final plug on this, because I am very passionate about getting involved, is let's not make our lives harder. Let's just get people elected that share our values so that we can do great things and take it over the finish line. And that means you write a check, you knock on doors, you make phone calls, you tell your friends and family. And if you can do all three, even better. If you write a big enough check, maybe you can get out of walking, knocking on doors. But either way, it's just, you have to spread the word about good candidates. And I think that getting involved at the campaign level and side of things is just as, if not more important than when they actually are in office and when these candidates are running that you believe in and you share your values. I'm not saying any in particular candidates as a C3, but I will say that getting involved in campaigns makes a huge difference. And especially with the low voter turnout that unfortunately we saw in Santa Clara County, every vote matters even more. And so we want to get more people to vote, but until then, we'll keep staying active and get involved and volunteer on campaigns. It means a lot. So, Adine, take it away. Thank you so much to our panelists for this wonderful conversation. Appreciated sharing this virtual space. And I don't know who won the game, but
I'm not going to mention who won the game. I will not do that unless if someone's recording. So I'll just be mindful of that. But I will say you guys put up a fantastic alternative program. So I want to thank Gabby for moderating the discussion, Diana, Margaret, Angelica for a wonderful, wonderful conversation. I want to thank our interpreters, Luis and Randy, who are there in the background interpreting your conversation for our audience. Sally, thank you for being here and being part of the setup. I took extensive note as I was typing all this up, and we hope that certainly the links that were shared as well will go out, both as a recommendation, highlights, action steps that members of our community can take. There's a lot. I will say a few things from a male perspective. It's really, really easy to be a male ally. And, you know, there's not many men on this channel right now, but for those who might possibly watch this, I think that's a role for us. And something to think about. I mean, I love the idea of getting policy and advocacy. That's actually part of my own background and my own work. I think that's a critical facet of how you make things happen on the ground level. I sometimes think that it's challenging for people to step into that role and a little bit of training on how to do it would be fundamentally important for people as well. So look for those opportunities, or even just like, how do I talk to an elected official? They're kind of scary. They've been elected, right? But things like that, it can just be helpful as well. So we will be closing this out. We will send out a questionnaire for everybody that we would love to get your feedback on. This helps guide us in our forward thinking as well. We'd love to see what other ideas people have about getting involved in policy, getting involved in advocacy as well. I will put a plug. We are looking at doing our next round of community conversations starting in our next fiscal year. That's July 1 and onward, and with a particular focus around mental health. We've talked a lot about it. For those of you who know me, this is not a surprise. For those of you who don't know me, this is a major push of where I think our communities need to invest significant amount of resources, because there's many in our community who are hurting, and this is such a crossover with the community conversations we've had over the past few months. So with that, thank you. You also get you'll get the questionnaire, you'll get the survey. Please participate in the survey, especially if you have the opportunity to give a grant. Thank you again for our panelists, our moderator, and for those of you who stayed to participate in this. Thank you again. Good night.
Thank you.